All right, Section 1021, affirmation of authority of the armed forces of the United States to detain covered persons pursuant to the authorization for use of military force. And then it's really when you drop down to under I call it subsection 2 here, it says a person who is a part of or substantially supported Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, or associated forces that are engaged in hostilities against the United States or its coalition partners. This whole thing with associated forces, this can be defined as anything. They can be saying, they can say, hey, if you put out information that is telling the people of the United States of America that the government is evil, that the politicians of our country are not really for the good of their constituents. If you go out and start making statements and saying church and state's going to unite in the United States of America, these things can be looked upon as inciting a spirit of terrorism and anarchy within the borders of the United States of America, which they already know that Al-Qaeda is responsible for. And so therefore they can say, hey, your activities are acting directly in association with Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. So you're an associated force, and therefore under Section 1021 of the NDAA, you are now a terrorist, and therefore you can be detained indefinitely, tortured, etc. I want to show you one more thing in this bill that many people did not realize, and it's I guess this is like subsection 3 under subsection C. I could be saying this a little bit wrong with my legal terminology, but nonetheless you can find it all in section 1021. And it says that these individuals that are found guilty under section 1021 that can be, that are liable for indefinite detention in military facilities, they can be transferred for trial by an alternative court or competent tribunal having lawful jurisdiction. Now, what do you mean? So anybody that's locked up under this, they can be transferred out of our country and tried in some other court system, which locks right into the Illuminati agenda of having a world court system. And if you've been watching the different cases, a matter of fact, different forums that our Supreme Court justices have been engaged in over the course of the last few years, they have been defining our Constitution by international law. So the stage has already been set for U.S. citizens to be tried in a world court, and Section 1021 of the National Defense Administration Act actually makes provisions for U.S. citizens to be shipped out of our country and tried in some foreign court system. This is the type of stuff that not just the American public, but the world is feeding their minds with. And so when you bring the truth to them, they're like, oh no, this can't be, this can't be. Of course you don't think it can be, because you've been eating so much Laffy Taffy that you become stupid. There is no semblance of reality that is bouncing around in your brain because you've been completely benumbed by the media. You're benumbed. So this stuff sounds like Alice in Wonderland, and it is Alice in Wonderland, but it's the reality of Alice in Wonderland, and that's what we're living in.
Politics in America today is identical to pro wrestling. And what I mean by that is, in front of the cameras and the public, we all hate each other. I'm going to kick my opponent's butt. I'm going to whale him from here to high water and beat the crap out of him. Yet behind the scenes, we all are friends going out to dinner.
Went to dinner together.
And it's all a work.
All intermarried.
Show business.
It's showbiz. And that's what you have today in politics. The Democrats and Republicans aren't really opposed to each other.
Left and right mean nothing. The only thing that counts is, are you working for Wall Street or you're trying to defend the people against the financiers?
RT is sitting down with author, former governor of the state of Minnesota, former actor, radio and TV host, a man of many titles and a wild biography, and a controversial public figure in the United States, Mr. Jesse Ventura. Thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
My first question to you is, your new book, American Conspiracies, Lies, lies, and dirty lies that the government tells us has just been released. Why is it important for people to read it?
There are many of us that don't believe the status quo of what we've been told on many of these events. You know, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, the assassination of Martin Luther King. And there's many of us that just simply don't buy what we've been told happens 100 years from now. I want people to be able to look back at this time and era and realize that these things were not slam dunks, that there was dissension in the belief on this, and that the documents were real, and that the book was based upon those documents to show that quite possibly we were deceived and lied to about these events for political purposes or whatever it might be.
You've had your share of pretty explosive encounters with the mainstream media in America, and you've accused the media of covering up government lies. Where do you stand now? How much can the mainstream media in America be trusted?
I don't think much at all. They're a soundbite news now, if you get what I mean, soundbite. There's no depth to anything. Plus, our major news organizations have really almost become monopolized. There's only like 3. Our media today is into creating the news rather than reporting it. And that's very dangerous when they're creating news rather than reporting it.
When you appear on the mainstream media, how much do you expect your voice to be heard?
Oh, I expect it to be heard very much, because far too many people in this country only rely on the mainstream media for any information. But, you know, the internet is getting super powerful now, and that'll be next. See, that's what the government has to control next, is the internet. Whenever government says they're going to keep you safe, get ready, because you're going to lose your freedoms.
To what extent do you think the government is doing this now? How much do you think Big Brother is watching the American people?
Oh, unbelievable. I went to a street corner in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and on that street corner, there wasn't one camera, there was 4 of them, one on each corner, watching everybody. You go through the city of New York now, all these cities throughout the country, we're being watched by cameras. What's it for? Our safety. Credit cards now are getting microchips in them so they can track you. They build our cars now with this North Star thing, so a satellite can track you anywhere in the country and know where you're driving. We're being watched more than any time in history of the United States of America right now.
You're often accused of scandalizing the events of 9/11. Can you sum up your position for us, and what do you say to those people who don't agree with what you say?
Scandalize it? All I do is ask questions. In this country, has it gotten, and that's what bugs me about 9/11. 9/11's an event you're not allowed to ask a question about.
Why do you think this topic is off limit?
Because clearly they don't want any questions on it. You know, right away, if you question what they told you about 9/11, they throw onto you you're unpatriotic. Well, I don't fear that. I dare someone to question my family's patriotism to this country.
Your article on September 11th appeared on the front page of the news website, the Huffington Post, only to promptly be removed. What do you think that was? Why did that happen? Fear, censorship?
Yeah. I can't believe the Huffington Post today will practice censorship. They asked me to be a contributing editor, and they said, write about anything you want. So it was the second time I did something. And they removed it. Well, I got news for them. I won't ever write for them again, and I know Ms. Huffington's always asking me, oh, you got to write for my paper, you got to write for it. Well, I got news for her. She just got her last article. I won't do a thing with the Huffington Post because I don't like it when people censor what I have to say.
Was this the first time you were faced with this kind of censorship, and have you actually gotten some kind of explanation as to why your article was removed?
They said that they don't do conspiracies. It was that simple. We don't do conspiracies, basically.
They had no idea you would be writing about 9/11?
I don't know. I don't know about that. They just told me to write about, you know, we'd want you to write for the Huffington Post about any topics you want. So have I been censored before? I can't think of it off the top of my head. Usually they'll simply ignore you. Like Fox News, the 3 big boys at night, Hannity, O'Reilly, and Beck. I now refer to them as the 3 Stooges, because I couldn't, with this book, I wasn't invited on to any of their shows.
You've been on their shows quite a few times before.
I've only been on Hannity's. O'Reilly will never have me on because he can't bully me. and he knows it.
Would you dare O'Reilly to interview you?
Oh, absolutely. I would dare Bill O'Reilly to interview me. In fact, I would say, Bill, show the world you have some courage and talk to someone who won't kowtow to you.
Let me go back to 9/11. I want to ask you why you think it is that when a person tends to question the events of September 11th in the United States, they're often attacked and called a conspiracy theorist, a domestic terrorist, and so on.
Well, because it obviously means that the power structure doesn't want any questions.
What about Barack Obama? He promised transparency, accountability. We have thousands of people 10 years after September 11th wanting a new investigation. Do you think that investigation will ever take place?
Mm-mm.
Why not?
Because they're not going to let it. Because it shows me a bit of guilt. If it's what they told us happened, why wouldn't they welcome another investigation? That would put all of us to bed, wouldn't it? It would shut us all up, wouldn't it? If they agreed to do a real investigation and what they told us was real, well, then that would destroy all of us and we could all then go about our business and never deal with it again.
You do believe that 9/11 was an inside job?
I believe that they either took part in it or they certainly knew it was going to happen and allowed it to. And to me, both are as bad as each other.
Who is they, Bush and Cheney?
Yeah, the administration.
What would you say to George Bush now if you ran into him on the street?
What would I say to him? I would tell George Bush, Mr. Bush, how did you get an honorable discharge from the military, considering that your military service, if I would have behaved in that manner, there was no way that I would have got an honorable discharge. I would have got at best a general discharge, and you have now cheapened my discharge because of your behavior in the National Guard. That's what I'd say to him. I wouldn't even bring up 9/11. I'd get him with that.
Now let me ask you about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I want to know how you see the way Barack Obama has been handling these wars, and can you grade him for us?
When he campaigned, he promised that he would withdraw us from these wars, and the opposite's happening.
Are you saying he shouldn't have done it? He shouldn't have sent more troops to Afghanistan?
I don't believe he should have. What have we actually accomplished? I don't know.
I want to ask you about the New World Order, the talk of this global elite stretching out their hands across the world. True or false?
I'm starting to think true. They're going to use global warming to achieve it. What they're doing with global warming, and here's what I don't like, we now pay local taxes, we pay state taxes, we pay federal taxes, and if this goes through, we'll be paying a world tax. Well, the minute this world group of global warming starts making money, well, then they're going to expand. With money, government grows. This is something that may be real, but the guys that are trying to fix it aren't trying to fix it. They're simply trying to become wealthy off it.
Hi, and you're now with the Forerunner Chronicles. All right, everybody, if you haven't heard it already, I don't see how you couldn't have. But as of this month, May of 2011, Osama bin Laden has officially been declared to be dead. According to reports from the United States of America's government, U.S. military acquired Osama bin Laden in Pakistan, killed him, and then dumped his body in the bottom of the ocean, where he is now swimming with the fish. Now, if I don't seem too impressed or too enthusiastic about this information, it's because I'm not. I want another opinion. And to get my second opinion, I thought to go to a very unlikely source, another dead person. Now, don't get me wrong. Forerunner's not practicing spiritualism here. I'm talking about the former Prime Minister of guess where? That's right, Pakistan. Her name, Benazir Bhutto. Benazir Bhutto filmed the following interview that I'm going to show you in the year 2007 on the Al Jazeera news program Frost Over the World. She makes some very interesting statements that might be the reason behind why she was assassinated 1 month after the interview that I'm about to show you. Pay close attention, because you're going to be shocked. Take a look.
But first of all, Pakistan and Benazir Bhutto. When the former Prime Minister arrived back in the country 2 weeks ago, after 8 years in exile, the homecoming parade in Karachi was quite literally blown apart by an assassination attempt. A suicide bomber exploded a bomb meters from Ms. Bhutto's open-top bus and killed more than 130 people. Benazir Bhutto joins us now. Benazir, hello and welcome.
Thank you, David.
Tell me, has that terrible assassination attempt affected your decision to carry on with this battle?
No, it's that horrific incident in which 158 innocent young men, a woman, a baby lost their lives has just made me more determined to continue. I do believe Pakistan is under increasing threat of an extremist takeover, and to save the country, I believe we must restore democracy, get the people's faith in the country, moving the country forward. So I'm determined to go ahead with the mission to save Pakistan with democracy.
And in terms of these three people that you mentioned, were they members of or associated with the government?
Yes, well, one of them is a very key figure in security. He's a former military officer. He is someone that has had dealings with Jaish-e-Mohammed, one of the banned groups, with Maulana Azhar, who was in an Indian jail for decapitating 3 British tourists and 3 American tourists. And he also had dealings with Omar Sheikh, the man who murdered Osama bin Laden. Now I know the man who murdered Osama bin Laden, the man who murdered Osama bin Laden, the man who murdered Osama bin
Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. According to the words of Benazir Bhutto, a lady that dedicated her life to fighting terrorist factions such as the one that was headed out by Osama bin Laden has been dead at least since the year 2007. But if that's true, what in the world is going on right now? Was Osama bin Laden resurrected from the grave and then killed again by the US military? And of course, they had to kill him again for good measure. Or is somebody not telling the truth? And if somebody isn't telling the truth, who's responsible for the lie? Is it Benazir Bhutto or is it Obama? One thing I know for certain is this, Mr. President, since releasing your long-form birth certificate and this declaration of the death of America's most wanted Osama bin Laden under your presidency, your approval ratings within the United States of America, they haven't looked better than since Yes We Can, whatever in the world that meant.
We have in this country one of the most corrupt institutions the world has ever known. I refer to the Federal Reserve Board and the Federal Reserve Banks, hereinafter called the Fed. They are not government institutions. They are private monopolies which prey upon the people of the United States for the benefit of themselves and their foreign customers. Regardless of whatever is written in code, the Federal Reserve really has no oversight, and they are not really bound by a checks and balance system like the 3 branches of our government. So without audits, it's impossible to know how much the Federal Reserve is actually printing, who they are loaning it to, and any potential conflicts of interest. Henry Ford said about the Federal Reserve, "It is well that the people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." Title 31 of the U.S. Code requires an annual physical inventory of our gold supply, but a complete audit was never done. So officially, nobody knows what has occurred for the last decades. After World War II, America had 70% of the world's supply of loose gold, but today we may have less than 7%. Senator Jesse Helms seemed to think that OPEC nations have our gold, while others believe that 70% of the world's gold supply is being held by the World Bank, which is dominated by the financial grip of the Rothschilds and Rockefellers. The Federal Reserve System has never been audited, and their meetings and minutes of those meetings are not open to the public. They have repelled all attempts to be audited. Arthur Burns, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, said that an audit would threaten the independence of the Reserve. Once again, it is important to understand that the Federal Reserve is a private institution. As the well-known saying goes, it is as Federal Express. It is a private bank that loans us a currency at interest. It is completely consistent with the banking model our founding fathers escaped from by declaring independence in the American Revolutionary War. I believe the banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. Already they have raised up a moneyed aristocracy that has set the government at defiance. The issuing power should be taken away from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. Thomas Jefferson. The controlling of the money supply and the economy is only a portion of the power the international bankers wield against us. The next tool for profit and control is war. Since the inception of the Federal Reserve in 1913, it seems as if we have been in a perpetual war at one place or another. There's a reason for this. It's important to understand that the most lucrative thing that can happen for the international bankers is war, for it forces the country to borrow even more money from the Federal Reserve Bank at interest. Not only that, but they have heavy investments in the weapons manufacturers.